Hi, it's Wesley Ure. I played Will Marshall on Land of the Lost, and I'm the killer on Toolbox Murders. And you're listening to Moose's Monster... I'm going to get this right. Moose's Monster Mash.
You're listening to Moose's Monster Mash. Welcome, Horror Hounds, to another all-new episode of Moose's Monster Mash. I'm your host, Moose. And let me start with, I apologize for the delay in this month's episode. It was graduation season, it was end of the school year, and then holidays. Time gets away from you. But... great episode for you this month. You know, Pride Month's just around the corner. So I figured it's a good time to talk about queer horror, gay horror, LGBT horror, queer cinema, queer-coded cinema, whatever you would decide to call it. There's no denying that the LGBT community and horror have a long-standing history of being intertwined together. And I couldn't think of anybody better to join me for this conversation than writer, actor, and director of Reunion from Hell, Hayden Newman.
Hi there.
Welcome back.
I know, this is like, what, my third appearance? Fourth appearance? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, no, it's, you know, like I said, you know, Pride Month's just around the corner, and
Mm-hmm.
I got to thinking, you know, I wanted to talk about, like, some, like, queer horror or queer cinema or, like I said, whatever anyone wants to call it, because there's this, like, myriad of different labels that it has, picks for the month of June.
Exactly.
And it's funny because the more you look into it, the deeper the ties go.
It really does, yeah.
And what I realize is it really is one of the things I love the most about horror, is because the some of the things that we'll talk about and maybe not talk about is that things that tie it into the tie some of these movies and movies that, you know, and like I said, there's just so many that we're not even going to be able to mention into the genre, that it's all a matter of perspective.
It really is.
You
yeah.
know, I think it's a matter of what you get out of it, and that's something that is almost unique to horror. You know, an action movie is an action movie. A comedy is a comedy. Sci-fi is sci-fi. Horror is something that you can look at through 1,000 different lenses, and you're going to get 1,000 different reactions, 1,000 different... You're going to identify with it 1,000 different ways. And I think that's how we ended up with at least a couple of movies on this list, and the subgenre of, you know, the gay horror and gay coded horror to begin with, which I think is great. You know, because, like, take Wolfman, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There was, you know, it's been said that, you know, Wolfman is an allegory for, you know, hiding the beast within, or, you know, playing it straight, playing it straight and hiding the gay, you know, the gay inside so you can make it in a straight world.
Exactly.
And as a straight guy, I never would have looked at that way. For me, it was just a really cool werewolf movie.
Yeah. Well, it was, like you said, it was two personalities. It was the regular person and then the wolf man, and it's looked at as excuse me, it's looked at as one's trying to, be in the normal world and be like everybody else thinks he should be. And then the wolf man is who he really is on the inside. And that's his escape.
And now, now we were talking before we started recording, and the subgenre has changed a lot.
It really has.
Over from when people first started identifying with it in the 30s to today. You pointed out, and we've talked before, the gay characters were the laughing stock, or they had to be the villain, or it was super tropey.
Exactly. Well, you in horror, you have that typical trope of the final girl, the girl that has to, find that courage in her to fight that monster. And I think that's one thing that why horror has always been huge in the LGBTQ plus community is because we were bullied. We were those girls, and we had to find the strength to survive it and to take back in, let's say, 1980, to take a guy and make him look vulnerable was unheard of. But it's really true that just like a woman, a guy can be vulnerable. And I mean, just like a woman, a guy has to fight back too. And it's that trope, there has to be that final girl. Well, why can't there be a final boy? And that's one thing when we did Reunion from Hell, people talked about, was that we dared to do a final boy.
And going back to the lenses, the 1,000 lens thing, it doesn't even have to necessarily be, queer characters. If the actor is LGBTQ, or in the case of Psycho, Norman Bates was portrayed as the mama's boy. And
exactly.
It, that's been looked at in a newer lens as, he was soft, and he was basically every gay stereotype you could come up with was rolled into Norman Bates.
Well, my opinion on that is, when you look at Norman Bates, he was very close with his mother.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really study it, yes, he may have had some identity stuff going on, but when you look at the Janet Leigh character, that's why she was killed, because Norman was attracted to her. So I wouldn't say that Norman was a queer character, but they like to portray him that way.
Yeah. So they definitely like to portray him as somebody who is queer, or definitely other.
Exactly. And I mean, if you go back and think about it, yes, Anthony Perkins, who played the role, was bisexual in real life. But that doesn't change his performance.
No, because anytime you see a performance of Norman Bates, they kind of run it about the same.
Exactly.
So it's, I mean, if it were just that one-off performance, okay, it could be some of the actor coming out. Obviously, no pun intended. But, you know, but when the character at this point is almost always portrayed in that very soft, gentle manner, it is very telling that is how that character was designed.
Exactly. And I don't know if you know or not, a lot of Norman Bates was based off Ed Gein. And Ed Gein was, a famous serial killer. And he was also a mama's boy. I guess you could say that. But, a lot of horror, even you can say straight horror, has been based off Ed Gein and the stuff he did.
He was a freak.
Yeah, he was.
And not the good freak.
No. No, but, that's the thing. Like I said, I've never seen Norman Bates. He was sensitive and everything to that aspect, but I never seen him as a queer character. I saw him as a character who was very confused. I mean, we can't go back into what the writer was thinking, but I saw him as a character that was, very close to his mother. Probably his mother was all he ever had. And while, yes, he did kill his mother, he regretted it. And it started messing with his mind. Kent Psycho as the title.
Well, and then in newer, I'd say post 2005, you see a shift in that now when there's a queer character, they're almost untouchable in films. So it's weird that, and I don't mean this in a negative light, but the queer community still hasn't risen to the point where Hollywood's it's okay to make them the killer.
Exactly. And
there's still they can still be prominent roles, but not they're directors and everyone are almost afraid that it's almost an overcorrection to where the queer community was a trope, and now if you make them the killer, you're lambasting the queer community.
Exactly. Well, and for years, the queer community, especially transsexuals, were portrayed as evil and the killers. If you go back and watch even the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, yeah.
Frankenfurter. If you go back and watch Dress to Kill. If you look at The Silence of the Lambs, that was really the last horror film, which I don't know if I consider Silence of the Lambs horror. I consider it more suspense, thriller, mystery. But that was really the last horror film where they portrayed a transgender person as the killer.
Famously.
That I can think of.
Very famously.
Yes. But, I mean, let's go back to 1985. And Mark Patton, who I have had the amazing fortune to work with, he stepped into A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and...
Well, let's just go ahead and we'll start our picks for the Pride Month Horror Watch, and yeah, that's definitely on the list. Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Exactly, and that really is, if you watch it, you may not as a child catch it. I know I didn't as a child. There's so many, what's the word I'm looking for?
I say the subtext and the over and undertones in that movie are just blatant and glaring. But you're right, as a kid, you're not going to catch it because you don't know those things. I mean, if you do, hey, more power to you.
Exactly. And I don't think Mark at that time even called it. I know Robert Englund didn't catch it. Robert Englund, for example, the scene next to the staircase where he's caressing Jesse's face. He said, "What is Jesse in that?" And his mindset, it was Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to David Chaskin, who wrote the film. Even though for years he said, well, I didn't write it as a queer film. It was just that they casted a queer actor. No, it goes back to David Chaskin. And, even Robert Russler, who played Grady in the film, who was Mark's character's best friend, he's even admitted that he knew when he read the script, there's a lot of gay undertones in this.
Well, and I mean, yeah, there are scenes like the locker room scene. Mark's barely involved in that scene. So to say that it was the actor is just asinine.
Exactly.
And without getting into the weeds of the backstory of that movie, it's definitely a fun movie to go back and watch.
It is, especially as an adult.
Yeah, and it unfortunately, and here's the double-edged sword of it. It unfortunately tanked Mark's career as a serious actor.
Yes.
But made him a household name. Yeah.
Yes. Mark, again, going back to Mark, if you look at his early career, he worked with Cher and Kathy Bates and Karen Black on Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean. And his character in that movie and that play ended up being a transgender character played by Karen Black. But I don't think they just sought Mark out to play these type of roles.
Well, and that takes that can roll us right into the next pick, actually, and that's Mark's documentary, Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, where he goes into the troubles that he had with this movie and everything that he did up to Nightmare 2, and then being told afterwards, you be cast as a character actor, but you'll never play straight.
Yeah, I believe it was, you can lead a film, I believe it was, but you'll never be straight. And I remember Mark telling the story of how his manager went in and was, ripping stuff out of his closet and saying, this is what you can wear to auditions and only this. And that was in 1985. It's just, what they did to Mark, and I will say this to the audience, if you haven't seen the documentary, please, you need to watch it because it's very insightful. What they did to Mark was just beyond, because Mark is a fabulous actor. So what they did to him was beyond just cruel.
Well, and that's why I say Elm Street, killed his mainstream career, but also made him a household name.
Yeah.
After Elm Street came out, he became the brunt of everybody's, he was the butt of everybody's joke.
Exactly.
He became the fall guy for the movie. And all this is talked about in the documentary, which is essentially his quest for an apology.
From David Chaskin, yes.
Yeah. And, it's interesting to look at it, because when you look at it as what could have been, had Elm Street 2 taken place, say, a decade later, I think it would have been more socially acceptable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was 19...
is middle of the 80s, right in the AIDS epidemic.
Exactly.
So you have AIDS scares everywhere. So gay is bad.
Well, I mean, there was, and you could hear it in the documentary from Robert Englund. I mean, you hear it in the documentary from Robert Englund himself when he's caressing Mark's face in that scene where he's like, "You got the brain, I've got the brains, and you got the body." He wanted to actually put the blade in Mark's mouth, and it was again going back to that Beauty and the Beast, but I think it was Mark's makeup person hollered, "Cut, cut, cut," and was like, "Don't let him put that blade in your mouth because it'll look like you're blowing him."
Yeah, you definitely, in the documentary, get more of a look at the over and undertones that we mentioned about Elm Street 2. And,
yeah.
And oh God, like you just said, some of the ones that could have happened, which, would have just made it not worse, but worse. I mean, I love Elm Street 2. But,
I do too.
In the case of where it fell in history, I think if any more subtext was added, it would still be joked. Well, it is still joked about, but
it
hardcore. I mean,
it is still joked about. But I have heard from many, and I've seen it from many LGBTQ people that was the first time they connected with somebody on screen. And a lot of them, Mark Patton was their first crush.
Oh, yeah.
And,
hell, he dances better than Crispin Glover.
Oh, God, yeah. Which Mark, I can personally say Mark did not want to do that dance scene. But, Mark was in the LGBTQ community a lot of people's first crush, and the first time they saw themselves on screen, even though I don't want to say it was ever intentionally supposed to be that way, but when it comes to Dave Chaskin and stuff he has said over the years, maybe it really was.
Well, I would like to think there was some naivete on his part, and perhaps it was written Jessie was supposed to be a girl and they just never changed it. Because if you replace Mark with a final girl in the normal final girl sense, Elm Street 2 tracks with every horror movie ever made.
Exactly.
You know, casting Mark in that role shifts the whole dynamic.
Exactly.
So it's almost like it was written, and then they're like, well, we're going to cast this as a guy, and nobody thought to go back and change it.
I agree with you there. And if we jump, and I'm just jumping from here to there, if we jump 11 years later into Scream, it has been said over and over and over again that Billy Loomis and Stu Macher was a couple.
Well, and I say that I wanted to hit that one next because I know that's one of your favorite franchises.
Yes, and Kevin Williamson has even said who is gay, is even said, you know, he didn't think about that when he wrote it, but I've actually had the meeting of the ability to meet Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard, and they joke about it. They're like, we're the first gay couple of horror.
Well, and more recently, it has been confirmed that they were meant to be gay. So yeah, Williamson, and I can't remember the interview, but in one of the interviews leading up to 6, I believe it was, confirmed that, well, yeah, he didn't think about it at first. It's possible that his, personal life and everything bled into the characters, and yeah, they're gay. So it went from a fan theory, which is what Elm Street essentially falls under, to this is confirmed. You don't have to wonder about it anymore. These guys are supposed to be like the forbidden couple. The tension's there.
Oh, it's definitely there.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely there. And like I said, Matthew Lillard and Skeet both, they own that 100%.
Oh, yeah.
If you ever see them in a panel or anything, they own that 100%. Like, they understand that they were supposed to be a couple.
Yeah, it's like best friends taking a step further.
Yeah, I guess you can say that. But, I mean, for example, I don't know if you knew this or not, majority of the guys that were in Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, majority of the guys in that movie were all LGBTQ in real life.
Well, and yeah, that goes back to what we were kind of saying at the beginning, where there's a lot of actors in the horror industry that are LGBTQ.
Exactly.
And that's why, like, now this is where I get a time jump a little bit. You know, I get a jump way back in time to one of my all-time favorite movies, Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Like, it is, and for years I didn't know this. But it's looked at as one of the earliest examples of queer cinema. You know, directed by gay director James Whale. Ernest Thiesker is openly bisexual. You know, that part, knew that. Not a big surprise there. But what I didn't know was the bride herself was an LGBTQ horror icon. Because she rejects like marital norms and gender norms, and like her disgust at finding her, seeing her mate and rejecting that is, kind of looked at as being queer coded. And, again, much like when we were talking about Wolfman, growing up as a straight guy, things I never would have looked at, but you look at it through a different lens, you're like, oh yeah, no, I could totally see where that somebody would identify with that.
Exactly. Now, I did not know that about the Bride of Frankenstein, but when I think back on it, I understand that.
Well, that's why, like I said, many different lenses.
Let's go to, for example, Elvira.
Mm-hmm.
Every man's dream.
That's it. Yep, every straight man's dream, and none of us ever.
And she's a lesbian. And, before she came out as a lesbian, she was a huge, huge supporter of the LGBTQ community. And, I mean, even this year, NECA, which is I'm sure a famous toy company, has released an Elvira that's in the rainbow dress. They did her in a rainbow dress, which I thought was awesome. But it's, if you go back and look at tropes, and I hate to say it because, for example, Alien is one of my favorite movies of all time. But if you really go back and look at it, Sigourney Weaver in that movie portrayed a lesbian. And I'm not trying to upset people who are Alien fans, but,
it's what it is. I mean, look at it through a different lens.
Exactly.
Watch it with a different set of eyes.
Exactly. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, if you go from Alien to Aliens, especially, for example, she come into this, badass bitch in Aliens. And, even with, and it's my all-time favorite movie. It's not a horror movie, but The Terminator. If you go from Sarah Connor in that first film to what she is in the second film, she had butched up a lot. Obviously Sarah was not a lesbian, or she may have been bisexual, whatever. But, the audiences accepted that. And, when you take a character, for example, if you look at some of these vampire movies.
Well, Interview with the Vampire for sure.
Yes. If you look at that, it's very much LGBTQ undertones. And if you watch the TV show that they have out now, it's even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
If you read the book, it's bigger. I mean, when that movie came out, they tamed it down.
Well, I mean, there's stories about hints of queer-codedness in Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yes.
And again, it goes back to never picking up on it, but also not really looking for it. So, okay, is it there? And then, you kind of want to go back and look and see what what people are identifying with.
Exactly. And with me, especially when it comes to Dracula, he had that seduction and all of that. He didn't care. When he saw somebody he wanted, whether it be man or woman, he would start that seduction.
Well, that actually leads me to my next pick for June. And it was probably the first queer-coded movie that I can remember ever watching. And that's Rocky Horror Picture Show.
You know, Rocky Horror is, you know, it's become a cult classic. I absolutely love Rocky Horror. I love everything about it. I've been lucky enough to do the stage play, you know, but when you go to Frankenfurter in that movie, he's obviously a sex addict.
Well, and that's why the tie-in from what you were saying about Dracula worked me for the segue, because he is, like you were saying about Dracula's seduction, Frankenfurter gives zero fucks. He will fuck anything that moves.
I think Frankenfurter was more attracted to guys, but he didn't care.
Yeah, no, he just, if it had I'm not even sure it had to have a pulse, actually. If it was lukewarm, he would have sex with it. And, like, this movie had almost all the isms in it, like hedonism, just about any ism you can think of that's, like, I don't want to say sin, because I'm considering, like, lesbianism and all those in there too, but, like the pleasurable isms.
Exactly.
You know, it had everything. Hell,
that's why that song, "Give Yourself Over to Absolute Pleasure."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it has everything, and it became a cult classic. Gets remade into a live musical on Fox, so it's now mainstream. Mainstream primetime queer horror. So that it's interesting, the journey that story took alone. But I mean, that's an entire conversation on its own, just its inception to, where it is today.
Exactly. And if you go anywhere, just about anywhere in the United States, there is a showing of Rocky Horror Picture Show every weekend.
Yeah.
It is the longest running show or movie ever to literally still be playing in the theater.
And what's funny is, it's like the great uniter. Everybody, regardless of race, creed, or color, has seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show or knows of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Exactly. And I think Rocky Horror brought people together in a way that, you could be LGBTQ, you could be this, you could be that, everybody was accepted. Well,
because, I mean, it really does celebrate differences. I mean, here you have a movie with Brad and Janet, who are like the whitest of white people.
Yes, they are.
Stepping into this hedonistic party, completely out of their element. And their lives are forever changed from it. And, I mean, it's like, it's like any other horror movie where you have people, like, compare it to Texas Chainsaw. You have the teens go and they're at the Leatherface compound, and you have the survivors and they're forever changed. Except in this case, there's song, there's dance, and there's a lot of sex. And
exactly, but
they're not, they're scarred from it, but it's more of a what the fuck just happened kind of scarred, not oh my god, what did we just go through? I'm lucky to be alive.
yeah. Well, it's like you brought up the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is another one that was, they say is based on a true story. The true story was Ed Gein, and if you look at Leatherface, I don't want to say Leatherface was transsexual, but Leatherface didn't care. He was, especially if you go back and watch that original movie, he was very, what's the word I'm looking for? He was very, he had his feminine ways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so he kind of come across as a cross-dresser a little bit there when he got dressed up.
Exactly. Which goes back to Ed Gein. I mean, it's not something that's unheard of, because a lot of films, well, I think the three main ones that was based off Ed Gein was Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Silence of the Lambs. But still, you find a way to, even though they are these killers, you find a way to relate to them. There's not this evilness to them. I'd say the most evilness was, I can't think of his name right now, but the guy in Silence of the Lambs. He was not Anthony Perkins and Hannibal Lecter, but the character that was killing everybody. I think he was probably the most evil.
And then the last one that I want to talk about is less of a movie and more of a franchise. And that's the Hellraiser franchise.
When we get into the Hellraiser franchise, I think Hellraiser, which, Clive Barker, who created Hellraiser, is gay.
Mm-hmm.
I think he wanted to create this world where it was about pleasure and pain, and it didn't matter if you were gay or straight or black or white or green or purple. You start messing with that box and you open the gate.
Well, and admittedly, I need to go back and reread the books that, Hellraiser and Candyman and all that stuff is based on. It's more graphic and, Barker was at the, forefront of the splatterpunk era, and from what the movie turned out to be, God, I wish I could remember the books, but from what I do remember was, it leaned more into the pleasure and pain as much as, Saw leans into the gore.
Exactly. And especially if you go back to, I don't know if you've seen it, the reboot they did a couple of years ago. Because in the book, Pinhead was never described as a guy or a girl. It was they were androgynous. I think that's the word. And they dared in that reboot a couple of years ago to cast a transgender actress in that role.
And people were up in arms, but
yes,
they killed it, literally on screen. But perfect casting.
Yes, and it goes back to, if a lot of people would go back and read the actual novels or anything like that, they would find out this stuff. But so many people, when they look at horror again, say it has to be a final girl. It has to be this helpless, she falls, she gets back up type of character. And that goes to, we talked about it before, and that goes to the Reunion from Hell franchise. When I started that, it was very important to me that, yes, Riley is a non-binary character. He has both female qualities and male qualities, but it just shows that that's not the main focus of the film, that he is gay. That's not the main focus. It shows that anybody can be put in that type of situation.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody can be vulnerable. You never know what it's like to be put in that type of situation where somebody is killing your friends and family and you're in the middle of it.
Well, and I said it way back when on your first appearance, and I'll say it again. Reunion 1 had the best portrayal of LGBT characters that I've seen, because they weren't tropes. They weren't, side characters. They were just characters who happened to be gay in everyday situations. And
that wasn't the focus.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just, this person could be gay, could be straight, doesn't matter. If they're going to die, they're going to die.
Exactly.
And that led me to wonder, so in your case, somebody who has gone their life as a gay man, now non-binary, when you were creating Reunion from Hell, the now, I guess, franchise, and I
didn't expect it to become a franchise,
right?
By the way, but
and
it did.
Riley, what part, how much of your personal life and personal experience goes into that? Because as we've seen, Clive Barker put parts of himself in there. There's Williamson put parts of himself into Scream.
Well, with Riley, especially in the first one, a lot of characteristics from my life and dealing with friends, and because I grew up in a small town, a lot of that went into that first film. No, yes, I drink, but no, I've never been where Riley was in that first film. But a lot of the characteristics and the, wanting to get away from that small town, even though it's different in the movie, came into play because, again, I grew up in a small town in Alabama, of all places. So when I was old enough to get away, I wanted to get away. I tell the story a lot of the first time I ever went to an LGBTQ bar. I was outside paid what it was to get in. I walked in, and it was like that scene in The Wizard of Oz. It was like it went from black and white to color.
Literally.
And I mean, there's a lot of me and Riley, and especially now, I've done many conventions. Reunion from Hell has gained a following, which is amazing. When you do a movie, you don't know that's ever going to happen. But, I've done a lot of conventions, and the first question I get after they introduce themselves is, when is Reunion from Hell 3 coming? Which is amazing. I've had so many people tell me their stories and how they relate to Riley, and that's amazing.
It really is. And I guess the next question I have then is, how hard is it to know where you end and Riley begins when you're writing the character?
With Riley, with that first film, it was a lot easier. And, Riley has to have growth between each film. And the second film, it was easier because I knew where I wanted to go. And the third film as I'm writing it, has been easy in some ways. Because there's such a time jump.
Yes, that's right. 3 is actually coming.
Yes, 3 is coming. And it already has, I will just say this, I'm not going to name names, but it already has some amazing actors attached to it.
It's me. I'm the amazing actor.
But again, and I've told people this, I've told fans this at conventions, 3 will be the last one. Because how many times can a certain one person or 2 people set out to kill one person? It becomes redundant.
Well, it depends on the franchise. We're up to 7 in Scream, more than 10 in Friday the 13th.
Well, I mean, when you look at Jason, he's like a zombie, and he's not coming after the same person every time. I mean, there was the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, but, the only, and I've said this, the only way, if, and that's a big if, because I can't tell you yes or no, if Riley was to survive 3, that I would do a 4 was based on new characters, and Riley would somehow come in and be like, I've been through this, I'm going to help you. Riley would not be the main target. Almost like Scream 5, if you look at it that way.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah,
it's honestly how I figured the conversation would go, and I was glad we were able to get it locked down.
Yeah, and I can't wait till the end of the month.
Yep.
When me and Mark get to come up there for the 2-day event. It really, really is an honor to be able to come up there and represent the community in this way, because like I said, the community has loved horror films for so long. I've heard so many people say, oh, I watched Halloween over and over and over again, or Friday the 13th, or A Nightmare on Elm Street, or Scream, because they relate it to Lori and Alice and Nancy and Sydney, as we were being bullied, but we found the strength to fight that bully and win.
Oh, yeah. And this is fun because normally I get to ask you what's coming up next, but now I know what's coming up next, so I get to talk. So the events he's talking about, if you're in the Omaha or Lincoln Council Bluffs area, June 28th and 29th. If not, come on in anyway. June 27th in Council Bluffs at Maloney's Live, we will be showing Reunion from Hell 2 and the Rocky Horror Picture Show with live drag provided by Lady E. Well, provided by Lady Edamame and friends, with appearances by Mark Patton and Hayden Newman.
Yeah.
We will have a silent auction with proceeds going to help the Nebraska AIDS Project. Portion of the ticket sales will also be donated to Nebraska AIDS Project. Tickets are $15 in advance, $20 a day of show. You can get tickets at the link in the episode description or at the event page on Moose's Monster Mash on Facebook. And then on the 29th, we will be in Lincoln screening Mark's documentary that we talked about previously, Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, and Reunion from Hell 2, also with Hayden and Mark. And we'll have another silent auction. It'll be, this one will be proceeds benefiting Out Nebraska. Tickets are $10 at the door cash. It will be at the Joyo Theater in Lincoln, Nebraska. Again, more information for that on the link in the episode description or at Moose's Monster Mash on Facebook.
And I have to say, what is the best time to do it? Pride Month.
Right.
You know.
Well, I mean, you and I have been talking about doing something up here for years now.
Mm-hmm.
And we were finally able to get something locked down, and the timing couldn't be better.
Oh, exactly. And, you know, I hope so many people come out, because this is, yes, we'll be signing autographs and all that, but it's not about that. It's about supporting a greater cause.
It's about the community, support the cause, and have a good time doing it.
Exactly.
Like, I'm going to be upfront with everybody. I'm not going to make a dime off of this. Well, I might make a dime, but I ain't making much else.
But I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's for a much greater cause, and it's an honor to be involved with something like this. And to think, if I'd have thought 4 years ago, when we did the very first film, that 4 years later, I would be where I am now, I tell you, you were crazy. Or who I'd worked with now, you were crazy.
Oh, I'm right there with you, buddy.
You know, I've been very lucky, and I appreciate that and appreciate the fans more than anything, because without the fans, you know, it's nothing. And when I get these messages from people on Instagram and Facebook about how much they love the films and, yada, yada, yada. And I respond to them, and they're shocked that I actually responded. Like, the fans are the most important thing to me.
It's a very caring community.
When I have, for example, the last convention I did, straight couples coming up to me and saying how much they love the films and how they cannot wait for 3. That meant a lot.
Yeah.
Because when we did one, when I wrote the script for one, there was never meant to be a sequel ever. Things just happened on set where we ended with this huge cliffhanger, and we were like, okay, we have no choice. We have to do a sequel. And we went into the sequel, and now people are wanting 3, and I can't tell you how many people have came up to me and said, Riley better not die.
See, I'm the opposite. I said, kill Riley, it'll stop the franchise.
But
it's the only way to stop the franchise.
Yeah. I will say I am working on the draft of 3. There's huge twist because it has become a trilogy. And of course, a trilogy, you have to go back to the events before the first film. There are some huge twists that nobody will see coming. Even some of the actors who know was like, oh my God, that's amazing. But, I didn't understand it until Lisa Wilcox told me before we did 2, and she had watched 1, you've created a character that you will forever be synonymous with. I was like, whatever. Whatever. And then I did my first convention, and people were coming up to me, and they were not talking to me like I was Hayden. They were talking to me like I was Riley. So at that moment's when I understood it. But again, it's been a blessing. And sometimes it has been a curse. I'm not gonna lie. But at the end of the day, it has been a blessing to be able to bring these characters to life and do it in a way that was authentic and not some kind of joke. And all I can say is, from the bottom of my heart, I thank all the fans who have watched the film, both films, and have fallen in love with the characters.
Well, I think it's just going to keep growing. And
well,
it's
again, like I said, 3 is the final one. Because, again, like I said, I've been in these characters' heads especially Riley's head, for 4 years. And as much as I love Riley and the storyline and how Riley has progressed from each film, I can't stay in those characters' heads forever.
So, all the movies that we talked about, except maybe Bride, are streaming on various platforms. Go check them out. Let me know what your favorite queer horror movie is. And you can find Hayden on Facebook and Instagram. Those links will be in the episode description. You can find me and other great podcasters over at electronicmediacollective.com. Or if you just want to follow me, which is fine, you can follow Moose Media Inc. on Twitter, YouTube, and Moose's Monster Mash on Facebook. Those links will also be in the episode description. Now, if you can't make it to the events at the end of June and would still like to donate to Out Nebraska or the Nebraska AIDS Project, or would just like more information, I will have those links in the episode description as well. Hayden, this has been fun.
It has been fun, and I do want to say to everybody, I hope you're able to make it. I understand if you're not able to make it, but please donate to these, organizations, because it is very important. And I would love to meet each and every one of you. Both nights are going to be fun, and I hope y'all all come out.
And until next time, Horror Hounds, mash on.
This has been Moose's Monster Mash. Come back for more chills and thrills if you dare.